During 9/11, I was working. I was coming off of a night tour. I had gotten hired to work for the day tour, so I just came off a 15-hour shift, and I was going to work overtime to work a 9-hour tour. And so when I came downstairs in the morning, the officer told me that I was hired and I was going to work the next shift. And some of the incoming people for the day tour was coming in. And so I was in a house watch and looking to see where I was going to be working that day. And I was told that I was going to be working in 105 truck, which is the truck that I'm in with engine 219. The person that was coming in during the day, John Chapora, he asked me could he switch places with me because I was assigned to work in 105 that day. And I told him sure, because he wanted to get more truck experience, and I knew that he was putting his transfer papers in to work in the truck. I swapped with him in the tour, and then I decided to start to prepare the rig for the next tour that I was working. So during that time, as I was checking the rig, a lot of the guys in the kitchen were gathered together because we were swapping tours, so that some of the night people were going home and the day people were coming in. Some of them saw the plane going into the building, and so there was a lot of commotion and a lot of noise. I went into the kitchen to see what was going on, and I thought they were watching like a movie because I couldn't really tell or process what was happening. And then you can hear the TV news broadcaster saying that a plane just went into the building of 9/11. So I was at work during that morning just really trying to process everything that happened. Well, during the morning, we were really just trying to figure out what was happening, and no one kind of knew. And I know for myself, I've never seen a tragedy that extreme before, or to see or be able to process what to do. In our mind, we are taught how to look at certain situations and access the scene and kind of get in our mind a layout of how to conquer some of the challenges that we may have during the course of the day. And so in my mind, I knew I could just never figure out how do we get up there? What do we do? This is a plane, so many people are involved. So during the time of trying to process it and everyone's talking, the tone alarm goes off, and 105 truck got sent to the trade center to respond. So we watched them go out and was just waiting to see whether or not the engine company 219, where I was assigned for the day, was going to get sent out, and it took a long time for that to happen. Eventually, we got sent out after 2 calls prior to that. One was food on the stove, and the other one was a suspicious package. But it took a while for us to get dispatched out to go and respond. We knew that all of the members from 105 went so much earlier during the day, and we were just trying to make sure that they were okay, but in ourselves too, just trying to figure out the best way that we can help. When we finally responded, we went through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. As we were going through the tunnel, there was a few things besides my nerves and not knowing what I'm getting myself into, and fear. We started to go through the tunnel, and there was this wind that came through the tunnel that shook the engine. I didn't know what it was, but in my mind, I was younger. I watched a lot of cartoons, and so I thought about like this Scooby-Doo episode where there was a cave in and all the rocks fell in front of the cave, and I just kept thinking, we're gonna have to claw ourselves out of this situation and be moving rocks, and we're never gonna get to the other side to help people. I didn't know whether or not the tunnel we were going in, whether it was gonna collapse, whether there was gonna be water coming through the tunnels. I didn't know, because it was just weird to me to have a vehicle that has 500 gallons of water shake in any way, shape, or form the way that it did. And so I remember the chauffeur stopped the rig, asked everyone was they okay, And then the officer just told the chauffeur to proceed slowly. So as he started to proceed to the end of the tunnel, we could see breaks of light come through the end of the tunnel. So I knew that we had some type of an opening. But as we got to the end of the tunnel, you can see that it was this large white cloud, and it kind of looked like a blizzard. And so I didn't know what to make of it, because in my mind, I just never imagined anything like that. So we stopped the rig, and we took some materials off the rig. We took our bags to do any type of patient care. We took extra cylinders, and we took tools because we didn't know what we were going to be doing next. But I remember as we were coming out of the tunnel on foot, there were people walking towards us that were covered in this white soot and white smoke. And I remember a woman telling me that she was asthmatic, and she was panicking and coughing and wheezing. And so I remember us just trying to pour water on her face to get a lot of the dust off of her, and giving them the best advice we could, which was just walk through the tunnel, walk to the Brooklyn side, because it would get you out. We knew we just came from there and there was no traffic. And so we were like, just walk, just keep walking. We proceeded to move forward. So at this point, the engine was moved ahead of us. And since we saw that some of the civilians needed our attention, we were on foot and we started to walk. Usually when you go someplace and you have to respond to a particular area, you get a ticket. And the ticket has all the information of where you need to go, where you need to be. And at this point, we were told to go to the command post, and he gave us the street address for the command post. So he took the rig and proceeded in front of us, and we were walking behind the rig. And then he stopped just to figure out what the surroundings were and kind of look to see where everyone else was, because as we were coming out, we saw that there were a lot of rigs that were abandoned. The rest of the members proceeded to walk forward to see if we could find the street that the command post was on. And as we started to walk towards the World Trade Center area, myself and the officer and the chauffeur were the only people that had radios at the time. Right now, all of the members have access to radios, but during that time, 2 other positions on the engine did not have a radio. So I remember walking the truck, the engine officer was in front of me and the chauffeur was still by the engine. And as we were proceeding forward on my radio, all I could hear was, "We're under attack, we're under attack." And then I heard this loud noise that sounded like a plane was flying overhead. So in my mind, I'm like, are these planes gonna be running into buildings like all day? Like, what is going on? And then all I can hear is my officer. I don't know what he saw, because I could barely see. He just said, "Run, run, run." So we all ran, turned around and ran. We dropped the stuff that we had and we ran, and he said, "Get on the rig." But in my mind, I was like, I'm not getting on the rig. The buildings are falling all over the place. I'm gonna get crushed in a rig. And at that time, it made sense to me that I would run to the back of the rig and sit on the back step. So the back step is where we have to put our feet on in order to take the hose off the back. But in hindsight, it didn't make sense to me, because if anything was gonna fall on the engine, I was gonna get hurt. But all I kept thinking is, I don't wanna get crushed. I don't wanna get crushed. I might be able to make it if I'm on the back. And then as I ran to the back, I heard the officers, before he got on the rig, he was like, "Put your mask on, put your mask on." And then I just remember putting my mask on, and it just got completely black. Like I couldn't see anything. And I just sat there and I waited to die. I didn't know if anything was gonna fall. I didn't know what happened. And I just put my mask on. I did what I was told. And I was just waiting for something to happen. So it took a while for the smoke to clear. It felt like an eternity, but it wasn't that long. At that point, I knew that we were okay, so I went to the engine to see if the boss and the rest of the members were okay. And everyone was fine. They were actually better off than me because they were able to roll up the windows. But so we all got off the rig again. The officer was assessing everybody to make sure that they were fine. And then we proceeded to take more material off of the engine because we knew at that point we didn't know what we were going to get ourselves into. So we went to proceed forward, and then we started to run into some more members. And then we started to try and talk about a game plan. We never found the command post. And so we started to try to assess what was happening. So at that point, I'm covered in white smoke. I have dust and debris and soot, and I'm trying to see, and I had to keep wiping my eyes. And so we found another rig. We opened up the stang on the top of the rig, which is like a deck gun, and tried to get water out of the abandoned rig so that we could clean ourselves, because you can't operate if you can't see and you can't kind of gather yourself. And so we collectively came up with an idea, because it was cars on fire, it was other buildings on fire. So we needed to find a water source. Being on the engine, that's our primary job, is to find where the water is. So we went into buildings thinking, maybe some of them would have tanks that we could feed into to kind of put out some of these fires, because we were getting no pressure from the hydrants. There was no water coming out of any of the hydrants. And so as we went around to try to assess some of the buildings, we knew that our water sources were non-existent. So at that point, we decided to collect some of the holes that we had on a lot of the engines, especially the abandoned ones. So we gathered all the 2.5-inch lines, and then we proceeded to connect them together, and we fed the lines all the way down to the river to be able to pump water from the river and draft it and be able to connect it to a tower ladder so that we could be able to get water to put out some of these building fires and the fires that were happening with some of the cars that were on fire at the time. And so after that grueling process of trying to get that done, we started to now process the fact that we're still around. I remember before I started working and we started to get everything together, I took a quarter out of my pocket at that time. I know a lot of people that are younger may not have this experience of putting a quarter in a payphone. And I actually called my nephew's grandmother, because her number is the only number that I could memorize at the time. And I called her and told her to call the rest of my family, because I wasn't sure whether or not I was going to live or die. And so I knew at that point that I needed to do that in order to process what I needed to do next. And I knew that if I didn't get resolved, that I wouldn't be able to work. So if I spent most of the time trying to process what I was doing, then I wouldn't be able to do my job. And I think that's how it is every day. Like, if I really sat down to process what I do, what my job really is, I wouldn't, and I don't think my brain would allow me to be able to do and sacrifice as much, and to not process family, and to not process your future, and to not process your life, and to be able to push forward through all of that in order to do the job that you have to do. So that was my phone call of processing. That was my phone call of resolve. So I told her, if you see my family, if you talk to them, just tell them that I'm okay. And if I don't make it out, that I'm dying doing what I love to do. This is what I signed up for. I've developed a passion for it throughout the years. And I was young on the job. I came in 1999. And so to be able to process the magnitude of my job wasn't quite there. I knew I had previously had gotten injured at a fire, and I knew the seriousness of my job, but not to the extent of a terrorism attack or the feeling of being on a scene and not knowing whether the terrorist attack was committed to just the air, that it wasn't on land, and that someone wasn't gonna come and shoot me from around a corner. I didn't know how thorough they thought out the whole process of attacking America. All of these scenarios played in my mind, but I knew I had to get to a level of resolve. And once I did that, then I was able to do whatever needed to be done, because I didn't have to fear death anymore, in a weird kind of way. We started to see some of the members from my firehouse that just came down to the site. And we proceeded to figure out where was 105, because 105 went before we did, and we were trying to see where the rest of the members were. So we walked around to all these different buildings to see if we could find the rig, and we never did. And also in the process, we were trying to help a lot of the civilians. And then during the course of the evening, we were helping to dig for survivors, as well as we got closer and closer to Ground Zero to see the devastation there. We knew that that day we wouldn't be able to make a significant dent, because it was still so much tragedy happening, so many different hazards, or watching dismembered people, and trying to figure out what was the best stream of operations. And I'm not sure at that time if the fire department had an opportunity to really process and assess that too. So we were all kind of independently falling on the training that we've had in order to proceed and move forward. 105, the engine was crushed, and all of the members on 105 died during 9/11. I had swapped tours early in the morning with John Chapora, and I was assigned to work on 105 that day. From the experience of 9/11, of experiencing almost dying, the sacrifice that John Chapora made, someone very close to me who was my mentor and I was his probie, had sacrificed his life to be able to, as myself, to not waste time, not take for granted that I'm gonna be here, especially when 9/11 was on a blue sky day. It was absolutely gorgeous day, to not take those days for granted either, but to process my life and to make sure that I do the most that I can and cherish and give the way that I can. Lives were lost, that I should be able to respect time that has been given to me in order to live my life and make it productive. The message that I would want to give to people in regards to 9/11 is, to me, even still being in this role, a lot of first responders really don't want the credit for the work that they do, because they love what they do and they don't really consider it as work sometimes. Even though you get crazy hours, you know, it can be very stressful when first responders get out of bed, when first responders leave their families, when first responders are just walking down the street, even off duty. Our nature is to help. First responders really love their community. So when you really think like no one cares about you and no one loves you, you could walk into stations, you can talk to first responders on the street, and the compassion, I think that's the biggest message that I want people to feel. So when they see, you know, a fire truck going by, or any first responders going by, and you hear the sirens going off, know that people in those vehicles are really showing their love for their community by sacrificing themselves every day. So especially the people from 9/11 walking upstairs, knowing that they were not going to come out, or were praying for themselves and their own families that they would be able to see them again, and they didn't. That's the biggest thing that I want people to really understand and acknowledge. And I think that first responders don't get enough respect as they should, and that the community really needs to embrace them and love them as much as they love the community.